Hopefully you all can hear me. As you can tell, this is not where I am usually located. That's because I'm currently in Scotland. That's also why we are currently streaming at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. British time, noon Pacific time. I think that I did all the calculations right. So I'm currently going through a few things, trying to get everything, make sure everything's working. And yeah, there is a Google Meet invite. I don't know why that was sent. So we'll have to figure that out real quick. But today we are going to be going over the Royal Society of Mythology with James Davenport from the team over in Painting Goat Games, which is a great name for a company. So we'll get him on, hopefully get everything started. But we're also going to go through the newsletter. We're going to go over some Kickstarters, some new products, and some Humble Bundles. I don't usually go over Humble Bundles, but there's a couple right now that I really want to highlight because I think they are particularly cool. So hopefully we can get everybody on, we can get James on, and we'll get that all figured out. And I'll need to be more cautious about making sure that Google does not add Google Meets. But if you're joining me today, thank you. Again, I know this is a different time for everybody, but we'll at least try to go from there. But first, we can go ahead and just jump in the newsletter, and I'll let James in, and he can talk more and kind of talk about this stuff too once we get him on here. So we'll get him in here soon, hopefully. Let's hear. We did talk yesterday. It's like we were good. He just messaged me, said he on the Google Meet, which is not supposed to happen. So. All right, so let's see here. First thing up is the last days for the Deadlands Humble Bundle Mega Bundle. This is a mega bundle of Deadlands, mostly Deadlands Reloaded stuff for the previous edition of Savage Worlds, which is the Savage Worlds Deluxe Edition. This ends this Thursday. This is a lot of content for a really, really good price. In fact, I'm actually going to open up right here. There he is. Hey, Jim, how are you?
I took a little detour into the dungeon of Google Meet, but I made it.
You came out. That's all that matters.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, apologies for that. I don't know why that happened. I don't know why Google Meet. I don't know why Google keeps like saying, "Hey, use Google Meet." Like, no, that's not what I wanted. But here we are. So we're just going through the newsletter, and we're going to go through the newsletter, talk about some Kickstarters, obviously yours. We're going to talk about some new products and some Humble Bundles, and then we'll jump in and we can talk to you about the awesomeness of the Royal Society for Mythology.
Sounds great.
Good. And feel free to jump in and talk about anything you want along the way. So first
now,
thing for the newsletter.
Are you speaking from Scotland now?
I am from, yeah, this is from Scotland. I have Scotland outside my window. And it's actually a beautiful day here in Scotland, which is not the norm.
Typical, right?
So absolutely beautiful day. I think it was like a high of it was high of like 50s, but it's been sunny all day. So yeah.
Nice.
So
totally
going through
Go ahead.
Yeah. So going through the newsletter, yeah, the last day for the Deadlands Mega Humble Bundle. Like I said, it's a really good price for a lot of really good stuff. I'm actually going to pop this open real quick. So over here, you can see here we got the Marshal's Handbook. We've got player's guides. We got 85 items, which is, I mean, some of these are duplicated a little bit by different sizes, but also some of them are like one sheets and stuff, but still a really good price for $25 for all of these products from Deadlands. So really good price. Just the note is, again, that this is for the last edition of Savage Worlds. Not a big deal to convert it. Really easy to do. And can go in with your current stuff for normal Deadlands now. Something else to note is that if you have, for some reason you're watching this and you don't play Savage Worlds, you do need to get the Savage Worlds core rulebook to play this. There does not come with a core rulebook in this bundle. So at least unless I checked, it didn't. So just be wary of that. You do need the Deadlands core rulebook to play this game. All right. So that's that. Going back over to the newsletter. The final files for the Mad World for Deadlands Lost Colony is ready for download. So if you back that, they should be available in your Pinnacle account using the email address that you use for the backer kit. So check that out. There is a new area inside of the My Account of Pinnacle's website where you can put in the email addresses you use for like backer kit, Drive Through RPG, and Kickstarter. So you can like put them all in there, something like that. Maybe different ones, but there's different places to put fields in for your different like deliveries, so you can automatically get them delivered for your account. So check that out.
That's the next campaign setting that our home group is going to do after we finish up Savage Pathfinder.
Lost Colony. Well,
Yep.
we have not. I think we decided we're going to do Solomon Kane after our Savage Pathfinder game campaign. We're currently running through the Rise of the Rune Lords, and so we need to get through that, and then we're going to do Solomon Kane. I'm not going to run it because I don't know Solomon Kane well enough. And one of my players has read quite a bit of it, or if not all of it, and so it would be way better to run it. Let's see here. Sorry, pulling this back real quick. Here we go. Weird War 1 is on sale this week for Steam and Fantasy Grounds VTT. So if you use Fantasy Grounds, if you use Steam through Fantasy Grounds, or Fantasy Grounds through Steam, there is a 20% off sale for Weird War 1 products on there. So check that out. Good chunk of change off if you're interested in running Weird War 1. I thought about running Weird War 1, but I just haven't never put the trigger on getting anything for it.
One of our best GMs in our home group runs one-off Weird Star Wars, and you're always a squad of stormtroopers put in, bizarre and supernatural and terrible situations, but they're fun as hell. They're amazing.
Interesting. So like. Okay.
So, I mean, it
like
usually
zombies
involves
and stuff, but with
the Empire has done something and disturb the wrong things or use the dark side of the Force in the wrong way. So you get zombies, you get all sorts of bizarre creatures that you think you're going in a normal situation, just rounding up Ewoks or whatever it is, but then things go weird, and usually the Empire's behind it.
Of course. That's interesting. Do you guys use the fan Savage Star Wars book from the fan group?
No, I think he's just made whatever mods he had to do off of Suede and just run it that way.
Gotcha. There's a really one of these days I'll get them on, but there's a really well done fan compendiums plural made by some fans of Savage Worlds and Star Wars that are out there that are very meticulously made. So just a little bit scares me because I don't know my Star Wars lore that well, but they are very meticulous and very well done for Savage Worlds, and you can get them in print and everything. So
that always reminds me of West End Games, right when Star Wars was sort of at a low after the big 3 movies came out, and West End Games got the license, and they started doing a whole bunch of stuff of filling in lore and doing things that Lucasfilm eventually referenced as they started gearing things back up again. So the role players had an influence on the course of Star Wars in a way.
That's a good piece of interesting. All right. So for moving on to the newsletter, on the Savage Universe stream, so if you go watch JM or sometimes Landauer over on the Savage Universe stream on Thursdays, funnily enough, this week we're both doing it quite early. Not only am I doing it 5 hours early, they're doing theirs about 6 hours earlier than they usually do, because they are talking to Aram Aviriam and Aviv Or from up to 4 players about Crystal Heart. If you don't, I'm going to give you a little bit of background because I knew about up to 4 players before they did their entrance into Savage Worlds. I read their webcomic. It was a webcomic about board gamers, and so a lot of their stuff was just about board games. And eventually they did a little comic about Savage Worlds that everyone uses now as the thing to teach Savage Worlds. And they also did a setting, a setting inside of their webcomic where they were playing Savage Worlds in the webcomic and going through a campaign in the setting of Crystal Heart. So then Crystal Heart that was released at some point as a Savage as a Kickstarter for a product for Savage Worlds. That's available. You can go buy it either on DriveThruRPG or wherever. But now they've announced that Dark Horse Comics, which is a fairly large comic organization, is going to be collecting all of the Crystal Heart stories, and they're going to be put into the webcomics. They're going to be put into a compendium, an omnibus comic book for through Dark Horse Games, or Dark Horse Comics rather. Apologies.
Nice.
So that's pretty exciting. And this Thursday, they're going to be talking with JM's going to be talking with Aviv and Aaron to talk about both Crystal Heart and their new collection for Dark Horse Games. And that's really exciting. I'm pretty excited to see that. I should have linked some stuff down below. I haven't yet. I'll try to remember to do so. I'm not very bad at remembering, but hoping we'll get that down there. The swag spotlight this week is Aetas Corinthia. I mentioned this last week because this was a product that kind of got brought up in our new product area. I'm going to talk a little bit. But this is a an Italian Ace licensee. They have both an Italian version and an English version, and they made a amazing product. It's one of those products from Swag that sorry. As well as products from a Swag author that I'm like, man, this really they could have done an Ace license for this. I think this is that looks that well done. This product is now available. It's 346 pages, which is a big book. Sorry, guys. On the trip over, I got sick, and so I'm trying to recover from that. But it's a steampunk setting in an alternate 1876, very, based in Europe. It looks to me, it reminds me of it reminds me a little bit of like the artwork for like Chrono Trigger, and I think Earthbound was mentioned by John Doom last week. So it looks really well done. So yeah, and then so check that out. There's a link down below for this. Whole bunch of new powers and edges and weapons and creatures. So yeah, definitely go check all that out. And then crowdfunding status reports. We have the Science Fiction Companion is beginning its UK shipping. They should have sent the books with me. I could have just brought them over on my plane. Pathfinder Advanced Player Guide 2. Shipping is starting now over in the US, which means I will be doing a box opening in about 2 months when I get back to the US and open all the products that I should be receiving, hopefully, during this 2 months. Rifts for Savage Worlds reprint will be opening the shipping portal soon. Rifts Europa, all the final files have been delivered. It is now in production. The Abominable Northwest says that download permissions were regenerated. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I think there's some problems with the download for the Abominable Northwest, but that should be fixed now. And then Lost Colony Mad World final files are now available for download. And then the last thing they announced is that the Doomguard, which is the board game that they tried to put out last year, they ended up pulling out of the backer kit. I believe what it was, or something like that, or maybe it was GameFound. It might have been GameFound. They pulled out of that, and they're gonna try again this year. So sign up to be notified. There's a link to the backer kit. There should be a link to the backer kit down below in the description if you want to get on this board game from Pinnacle. So that is all of our newsletter stuff. Let's go ahead and share this tab instead. We have one Kickstarter going on right now, and that is the Royal Society of Mythology. Sorry. Yeah, so we're going to be talking to James here, or Jim. Do you prefer Jim?
Jim is common, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll be talking to Jim about that. So we'll talk all about the details, but that does end this Friday, Friday the 13th. So don't be unlucky.
Inauspicious about that, yeah.
Yeah. Don't be unlucky and wait till then. Make sure you back it on before then, so you don't. Something bad doesn't happen on Friday the 13th. So just take care of that.
Avoid it. Do it today.
Yeah. Do it today. We'll be talking about that so you can get an idea of what it's like. And then lastly, I did want to go over a few other things before we jumped into that discussion, though. Let's see here. There's a few things that came across my desk, my inbox, I should say, of products that I thought looked interesting that came out this week. The first product, this didn't come out this week. It's actually a fairly old product at this point. It's about 5 years old now. 4 years old now. And but it is now available for print. So if you want to print it, you can now get it in print from Drive-Thru RPG. This is the Sovereign Stone setting book for Savage Worlds. I just think it looks really, and I don't know much about it yet. I just think the artwork looks really well. And the name Elm, it just looks really well stylized. I don't know. I read a little bit about this, and it looks very interesting. But yeah, so take a look at that. Let's see here. Street Wolves Turbo Dreams Adventure Collection. Street Wolves is like this, like I call it it's a retro wave. I think is what it technically is. It's retro wave setting, takes place in the late 80s with like early 90s technology, but like the way that the 80s saw the future, with these like really cool, interesting bikes and cars and stuff, and T1 internet connections and such. And this is a collection of adventures for that. I haven't run a Street Wolves game yet. I do own the book. It's a beautiful book. There's too many things in my backlog of games I need to play. So, but take a look at that. Another installment in the Fundraiser series. If you're not familiar with Fundraiser, it is setting rules, edges, and just new ways for you to handle different elements of Savage Worlds, whether it be bennies, whether it be the wild die, whether it be conviction in this case, raises, the action deck, whole different ways to just try to perceive Savage Worlds and different elements of the game with new setting rules and such. So just gives you like little twists, and you can go check out this one on conviction. I'll link down below. And then the last one, I really wanted to mention this one because I obviously have mentioned this before and I love it. And that is the Simply Savage Bestiary for Savage Worlds. The way that they design monsters in this is like my ideal for designing monsters. Simple, doesn't require. Yeah, it doesn't require you look up anything. Doesn't require you to know edges memorized. Doesn't require you to have powers memorized. Reading through it, I'm excited about it. There's definitely a few things that I would personally tweak, but I think overall the general design philosophy of this bestiary is the way I should think we should be looking at trying to make more monsters going forward. But that's that. And then the last thing, I don't have this up right now. So let's go ahead and stop my screen share here. But there are currently two Kickstarters going, or sorry, two home bundles going on. We mentioned the Deadlands one. There's also one for a series of RPG books. It's like Game Master's Handbook of X. And I can't speak to any of them except for one. There's one that is in the main big bundle and in the middle smaller bundles, like 4 books, I think. And it is the Game Master's Guide to Proactive Role Playing. The forwards by Ginny D. It's blue. It's like her colors. But it's written by two other guys, and I've read it. It's a really good book on helping you figure out how to tell a story that's more proactive, meaning that your players are going after something instead of them reacting to what the bad guys are doing. Instead of them being reactive to what's happening in the world, they're more going after something. They're trying to attain their own goals, and it just kind of changes the elements. It makes it so that even when they're, maybe even when you don't have a plot thread necessarily for the bad guys, they have their own goals they're trying to go after, and they're going to be more interested in the world. That's really a good read on explaining everything and how you can get goals for the players, goals for even for your NPCs and everything. Really good book. So I highly recommend checking that out. I can't speak to the rest of the books that are in that series. I've never read them, but I've heard good things about them, or at least some of them. So if you want to check out that bundle, there's a link down below. All right, with that is everything I had. We can now proceed to talking to Jim Davenport about the Royal Society for Mythology. If you're just joining us, I'm TheSavageGoose. This is Jim from, I guess, according to your little tagline, Dragon Laird Games.
Right.
But you're working right now with Fainting Goat Games to produce this particular micro setting. Where do you want to start? How do we just tell me? Give me like your elevator pitch for the Royal Society of Mythology.
So to the common person on the street of London, they'll walk next to this building that looks like a Victorian mansion. It takes up the whole block. Beautiful old architecture, and you got all sorts of kind of interesting weirdos walking in and out of the building. If you went in and you asked about it, it's like, well, this is the Royal Society of Mythology. We study myths. We look for, artifacts and bits of writing that can tell us more about the myths. Myths are fun. We have monthly dinners that, we get chefs from around the world and we tell our stories and all this. And that's great. But, if you go through that one door over there that nobody really talks about, you get to the inner circle, and the inner circle is doing other things with mythology. They understand that, the mythology is all based on truth, that these myths still exist today. These creatures and plants of mythology still exist today. They've been hidden by something called the veil for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And there's a reason for that, and they're understanding the reason for that and understanding why the veil appears to be failing. Not only the onslaught of human population growth and technological advancement to see every possible square centimeter of the earth is starting to penetrate these things that have been hiding these creatures forever. But they have their own agenda. And so they're mounting these expeditions, these myth hunts, where they gather talented individuals, make them sign NDAs with blood oaths, and send them out to go
Okay.
get samples of these myths to, go find them, collect some DNA, some discarded scales, whatever they can find, which means they have to go to relatively remote areas, not always, but relatively remote areas, figure out a way to get past the veil, which messes with their smartphones and computers and advanced recording equipment. So,
That's just a question I was about to ask about, like what is the time period? But it's modern time period.
as modern time period, yeah, it's today. And, they have to venture into this with, a little more primitive technology, and which kind of lets you have a little more of an Indiana Jones retro feel at times, with what people are carrying around. And they've got
Right.
to sort of sort out, well, this is what we were told. This is what the myth says. This is what the society thinks they've discovered in secrets, why they're sending us here. And so we have to sort that out. We probably have to solve some occult clues based on what we're finding in the area. And not only that, we've got rivals. So there are other organizations that are doing, very similar things for different purposes. And, the classic example is the Balak maneuver from Indiana Jones. Fine, you go in and get the thing, come on out. I'll just take it from you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the the key the key twist to remember is that you're not going after the Holy Grail. You're not going after objects of antiquity. You're going after creatures, and sometimes creatures will talk to you. Sometimes creatures will try to eat you or kill you. Sometimes, they're very benign. You can negotiate. So there's all sorts of, different kinds of challenges you're going to run into, and sometimes, either the creature is particularly benevolent, or you just happen to decide, well, I'm going to eat a few leaves of this thing. Sometimes these encounters can change you. You can get blood boons, so advances
Okay.
or edges or things, to that supernaturally change you. And some of these things can be bad. You can have blood curses as well. So there are definitely things you should not eat. Um, but as you go on and you deal with the rivals, you deal with, mundane threats of, the government's finding out, or somebody with their smartphone filming you in your Jeep with a creature in a cage trying to get to the airport as fast as you can. You've got to clean that up and hide the fact that these things exist, because the Royal Society doesn't want to endanger them. It doesn't want everybody finding out about them. It just wants to find out about them and get their secrets. So you have to navigate all this stuff and then deal with what the Royal Society might really be doing with all this information, with these live specimens and this DNA and, all these other clues that you and the other expeditions are collecting at a fast pace.
Okay. That's it.
It was a long elevator ride, but that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, you're saying that. So the way when you start out an adventure in this, is it assumed that you're already a member, or is there like how would you become a member of the Royal Society? Do you just walk in, or is there more to that?
So I always envision this, and this gets back to, why this is a micro setting and why I'm doing this in partnership with Fainting Goat Games. They they created what they call a micro setting. I call it a mini setting, whatever.
Okay.
Their micro setting, Raiders of the Ghost Zone, came
Okay.
out. I
Yep.
was already familiar with their stuff from the After. I'd run a campaign of the After, loved it. I was already talking to them about, maybe writing some stuff for them. And then the Raiders came out. And I thought, this is perfect. I get ideas for settings, I write things up, but you know, I either don't devote the time to it, or I don't think there's going to be a market enough for me to put up a 200-page book all about this setting. And, is this too big of a deal, too big of a risk, whatever. But I can
Mhm.
take a concept and I can put all the key juicy bits that a GM is going to need into a mini setting of 35 pages, and they can easily run. In this case, with the Royal Society of Mythology, you get 6 basically one shots or myth hunts in the main book, and then there's
Like one sheets essentially.
essentially, yeah, it goes over a couple of pages, but you get all the stats of
Yep.
sort of the thing that you're going after, what are the complications, and all the details. So GMs can just run those things off, as one shots, but you can also weave it into a campaign if you want. So back to your question, the introduction is always envisioned it as being one shots. You're already members, you already have roles. Whether you're security, whether you're cleaner trying to keep evidence of what you're doing quiet, or you're an occultist
Okay.
trying to solve the puzzles and clues. Um, so there's a companion book called the Wendigo of Ione, which is a seventh myth hunt, and it also contains 6 pre-gen characters, sort of archetypal characters. So you can take those 6, and in fact, I'm going to do it at Origins in a couple weeks. Take those 6
I wish
pre-gens.
I could go. It'd be great.
Yeah, being a scout is pretty cool too. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, and just sit down and run one of those suckers in 4 hours, and you're done. Now, if I was going to do a campaign of it, I think I could definitely have some fun with how do you become part of the Royal Society of Mythology. In one case of the pre-gens, the woman is a legacy, so her father is a part of the Royal
Mm.
Society and sort of brought her in. Other people are recruited for their talents. So there's different ways that you can be brought in, but it's definitely not an easy thing to go through that secret door and be part of this back side of the RSM.
Right. So when I think about, is there any particular pieces of media that you had in mind when creating this? I mean, obviously we talked about Indiana Jones already, but is there anything else, other TV shows or movies or uh, books that kind of inspired you to this particular setting?
Somewhat. I mean, I'm definitely familiar with the Warehouse 13 or the Supernatural and Indiana Jones, Librarian. There's lots of people who've sort of mined this space of digging back into the past. And for me, Supernatural was, you know, didn't have the right focus. I wanted to focus on,
Sure.
the classical myths of, many different cultures around there. And the rest of them are usually looking for objects with magical powers. And I wanted to, veer away from that and be more original and say, okay, well, you're going into the creatures. And yes, there could be magical powers involved, or the plants or whatever.
Sure.
And yes, you could come across some object, but that's not the point of it. And the fact that you're going after living things opens up a lot more possibilities as to what can happen with that.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the one you're talking about, like going through the veil and like things not working and everything, I actually ended up thinking more about Kong Skull Island as a like, here's this mythical creature or at least a mythical place that you got to like get through the veil of the storm to get through, and
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
that they'd probably be like,
there's one of those in one of the myth hunts, actually in I think it's in the Indian Ocean, where there's an island that people know about. It's sort of the classic, sort of always obscured by storms, so it's a little dangerous for anybody to sail there. People avoid it, but if you do go there, oh well, there's an island in there that just somehow just never shows up on the satellite scans or anybody's mappings.
mm, okay. So you said that when you go through the veil, some technology doesn't work. So like what? Just to get an idea, like what kind of gameplay we'd be expecting then, as far as like narrative gameplay, I should say. What kind of things do not work when you're past the veil?
So you're talking about anything with electronics. So as you start to get into the area, things will start getting
Like
fritzy.
circuits?
But as you start getting really close, then okay, no cell reception. You can't get your digital camera to turn on. Your hand computers are not going to turn on. And in a way, that becomes sort of, how do we zero in on where the heck this thing is? We know it's in this forest. Okay, that's helpful. Well, there's different ways for the GM to give clues, and part of it is going to be, okay, well, our equipment is getting worse and worse. We must be on the right track.
So is it anything with electricity doesn't work well, or is it just anything with like a circuit board essentially?
With circuit boards. So you can
Okay,
have stuff with batteries and power, but it's not going to have any sort of higher order computation as part of it.
sure. It's like a flashlight's going to work, but not necessarily anything else.
Right, right.
Let's see here. So okay, sorry, I had a follow-up question. I was reading the comments and I got distracted. It says John Doom said something about magical plants, and it's something about San Pedro cactus. Okay.
I mean, that's
Not
one
sure,
of
not sure.
the fun parts of this is, the amount of cryptid lore that's out there that can be mined is almost endless, and you can take anywhere in the world and start saying, okay, well, what's the local myths here? There's always something interesting and different about what's going on there. I was just
Yeah.
writing up another myth hunt to run at Origins, and I just started to say, well, I'm going to look at Guatemala and say, well, let me just dig in there and try to understand more, because you got Mayans and ancient stuff there. This could be kind of interesting, and lots of local mythology from Mayan times, but also the Hispanic influences and the Catholic influences, and it's kind of just fascinating to learn as you're going through it and trying to craft something out of it.
Yeah. I mean, even in so where I'm usually live, not right now, but usually in Pittsburgh, um, there's an area nearby that has this uh, it's an alien sighting, and we have a few other like weird lore things around us too, um, like a missing plane that flew into the river and never showed up again. Where did it go? Which actually brings us to the question about the veil. Is the veil when you pierce the veil, is like the veil like a barrier to another world, or um or like another plane, I guess.
It is a field of transformation placed upon our own world. So
Okay.
if the veil were to fail, the topology of what it was covering would generally be the same. It was always this world and stuff, but the impact that the veil has is often invisible and subtle. So things
Okay.
can look pretty similar, but the deeper you go into it, you will notice that things are acting a little differently. You could be hiking through the forest, and if it's getting toward nighttime, there might be fireflies around, but once you're getting the veil, they become a little more like will-o'-the-wisps, or
Mm.
you can see things are acting differently, or animals are acting a little bit differently, because they're all impacted by this magical field.
So is it easy to accidentally, if you're hiking through a particular area of forest or whatever, is it easy to accidentally get into the veil?
No, it's got that whole self-protective aspect of it. I mean, it
Okay.
appears that its whole purpose is to protect and preserve these creatures and plants. So having people decide not to try to go up that peak, or you know just say, well, maybe this isn't the right day for a hike, just subtly steer
It's
people away. Yeah,
just like kind of like what's there's that thing in Doctor Who that if you wear it, people just don't want to look in your direction, and even though they could just look right at you, they just kind of like ignore you a little bit.
they're distracted, or yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Um, okay. Cool. So let's talk about what's actually in the book. The PDF is like, was it 36 pages, I believe? 34, 36?
I think it's 34.
Yeah. Um, and you mentioned that there's several pages are going to be the monster hunts. Um, and then obviously there's going to be some information about like what the Royal Society is and the opposing factions. But what's in it? What else is it? What's in there for? Let's talk about the GMs first. What kind of tools are available in here for the game masters to help them get ideas to run their own games, or to like get to run more games for their players?
So the basic thing that I give to the game masters is the structure of a myth hunt itself. So I'd say, well,
Okay.
for anyone that I produce, and if you're going to create one, you should follow the sort of the same thing. Is you're told what is the place that you're going to, what's the myth that you're dealing with, and what does mythology say about it. What is your actual mission? So is it just to confirm that it exists? Are you supposed to get DNA evidence? Are you trying to capture a living sample of this? It can vary as to what the RSM wants to send you after. Who's your local contact? They always try to have somebody on the ground that is either an ally of the RSM, a member of the RSM, that can help you navigate, you know, local customs, local, government red tape, that kind of stuff. What's your cover? If somebody's government stops you, how are you going to explain why you're there? And
Mm,
then what's your gear? So every archetype has gear particular to what they do, but based on what the myth hunt is, maybe there's something else that you're going to need to have. You should always have some sort of ground transportation if you need to, go a long way. Then there's also has to be a like an exfil point to say, okay, if you go and you do capture a specimen and you use, the cage provided in the back of the Land Rover we gave you, you need to get back to this private airport. If you do that, RSM, allies or employees can take it off your hands and handle it at that point. So that's sort of your end point of the adventure in a typical case. In a campaign, you could have more fun with that and have them back on the plane ride or back on the steamship for something particularly big and have the adventure kind of continue. But, basically you start by, coming in and landing in the area. And if you get to the exfil point, you've, completed the adventure. So you set those things up as, the basics of what every adventure should have, and that gets and make sure that the players themselves have enough to go on, have enough to understand what they're starting to get into.
okay. And so that's for the game master. That's what they have access to. You mentioned that you have some. So I think you said 7 archetypes for players. Is there new edges or any like guidance for first? I guess let's say new mechanics. Let's talk about new mechanics first. What kind of new mechanics are available for players in this micro setting?
So it really relies on Suede for the most part. Even the pre-gens are created purely with the Suede rules involved. Now the setting does introduce a couple of hindrances, and like I said, you're going to be exposed to magic. You're going to be exposed to these creatures, and
Sure,
sometimes, you know, willing or not, you may, uh, you know, be cut and get some of their poison, or you may decide to,
sure.
you've always been,
You may be
you have,
affected.
yeah, you have a knowledge of a secret myth that if you eat the heart of something, you get critical power, whatever. There's all these things you can try to do, but there are hindrances you can get as well that you can become. One is called dead eyes, where you start to really become more of a cold person. You have more difficulty with personal relationships, and you don't really laugh anymore. That sort of struggle. And another angle, the hindrances you can pick up are more primal. That you become more animalistic, and again, less able to deal with normal social situations. So there's a danger of going down the road of trying to make the magic a part of you.
Okay.
Beyond that, the rest of it is pretty much setting. There are the blood boons and blessings, these ways that you can get the powers, but the things that are awarded to you are either an actual power, or they're an edge, or they're like an attribute increase. Your strength increases or something like that. So again, they're all affecting aspects of the main rules themselves.
Sure. Sounds good. So I get. Is there any when it comes to creating an event? So it sounds like there's. Sorry, trying to figure out where I want to go next. When it comes to players have most of the time they're going to be using Sway to make their characters, if not using the archetype. It's a modern day setting, so we have access to all the modern day accoutrement. Some new hindrances based on and abilities based on what happens for the monsters.
Right.
Going back to the GM side, when it comes to the monsters, you said there are monsters that are statted out for the myth hunts that you created. Do you have any guidance for people who, if they have their own lore that they want to do, right? If they have a lore from their own area that they're like, oh, I want to put our area into the game, and they want to stat out a monster that's like for their lore. Do you have any guidance for them on how to make a stat block for these cryptids that all the cryptids that we're trying to create throughout the world?
Yeah, definitely. The way that I'd look at it is you really you need to understand what kind of encounter that you want to have. So are you
Mm,
dealing with something that's intelligent and you want them to have to, reason with it, negotiate with it, outsmart it, out riddle it, whatever you're going to do, or are you really talking about something that's primal and can be, violently dangerous or something like that? Once you sort of understand that, I usually go to the different sources, either Suede or even Fantasy Companion for inspiration, and I find something that's relatively close to say, okay, well,
okay,
yeah, I want something that has like a basilisk's stone gaze ability, but it's different in other ways. But I know I want that, so I'm going to go look in the bestiary and see how basilisk is handled, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to put together what I think it needs to be, and try to in terms of power. With sway, that usually comes down often to toughness and how much damage it can do. As sort of how tough of a fight is this going to be? Again, I'm going to look for examples in Suede to say, okay, well, it's going to be about as tough as this, or this is this is a good inspiration for that. But in a lot of cases, there is stuff already in Suede. There is something, I forget if it's a basilisk or a minotaur. There's something where in the myth hunt it says as persuade with a couple modifications. So the stat block isn't actually replicated. It's
sure,
just use the Suede one because it's already there.
yeah, cool. Yeah, that's helpful. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is understanding that you can just reskin existing things and just
Exactly.
modify them slightly. One of the other companions I would recommend looking at, I recommend it, is the horror companion. Since we're going for like that kind
Mhm.
of like cryptid type thing, I think they have some cryptid type creatures in that book as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say take a look at that one. Um, let's see. Looking through here, and through our comments here, mostly from Molotok and Hampshire Doom. Good to see you guys. Let's see if there's anything from these guys they want to pull out here. Let's see here. Graham Moltek says that the Karnaki stories are I'm not familiar with them. The Karnaki stories deserve a mention for myth hunting media. So good to know. Uh, not familiar with those stories. So let's see here. Try to check out here. Do-do-do-do.
One of the other aspects that I put into the mini setting, because you were talking about how would you run a game of it and thinking about a campaign, is I put in a section called the big secrets. And
Mhm.
this is where the GM really needs to decide what kind of flavor of campaign do they want. How dark do they want it to be? Do they want it to be,
Okay.
magical is amazing and, you can just people get to do all sorts of cool new stuff? Or is, magic a curse? Is, the fact that the veil is weakening, does that mean that more and more violent creatures are going to get out, and the player's experience should be that most myth hunts are dangerous, and these mythical creatures are quite lethal, and in many cases have been alive for hundreds of years, if not longer. Is it really more about the RSM and its competition with its competitors towards getting power? If they're assembling all these clues and all these bits of DNA and things from magical creatures, what are they going to be able to concoct, and what kind of magic are they going to be able to harness, and what are they going to do with it? And do you want the RSM to be the big fluffy, never doubt it organization that always has your back, or is it like a Mission Impossible movie where most of the time somebody in the organization is betraying somebody else? So there's a lot of larger themes you can explore. So I spent a little bit of time talking to the GM about how you would do that.
Very cool. Sounds good. And I like it when there's like, personally, when it comes to like small settings, or even like, I guess I say anything, I like having like options on deciding like how strong I want certain themes to be. Maybe I like to dial in what the theme should be like. So it's nice to have that ability. Grummaltuck says, for many settings like this, I really like having as little added in the way of new rules as possible. So kudos for that. And Hamster Doom said he agrees. Find difficult to take a dozen new setting rules and edges. I love settings just like this one where you can just grab and go. So
Yeah,
two
trying to play on the
thumbs up
heart
for
of
that.
what makes Savage Worlds great.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely nice to just have when you have just the core rulebook and that setting, like in your case, this small magazine size details that you don't necessarily need. You just need to like read it, understand the setting, understand what's going on, and then you can just run your game based off that.
Yep.
So that's all. It's really nice. So yeah, so awesome. So is there anything that we have not talked about that you want to mention that I've missed on asking you about?
Um,
We
I
talk
don't
about
think so. I
these.
mean, go
We
ahead.
talk about these factions. Like what you mentioned. There's actually quite a few factions in here. You guys have one, two, three, four rival factions to the RSM.
5, I think. 5, yeah.
Five. Yeah, sure. Uh, so five rival factions. Why so many?
I felt like there was, this kind of feeds back into the flavor that you want to have your campaign have, because
Okay.
some of these competitors are a little more lighthearted. Some of these are much more dark. Um,
Okay.
so you can kind of decide if there's only one of them that exists in your world, competing with the RSM, or more than one. Um, and there's snippets throughout the book, quotes and examples of things to try to give you the idea of, um, for any of these groups, it you really need to have some sort of iconic NPC that they start running into, that is, oh, okay, we're going against the order. Well, we keep running into Raoul, and he always seems to try to be, throw a wrench into into what we're doing and keep us from doing what we need to. He's not trying to kill us, so we sort of spar and do whatever we're going to do. We go back to our corners, but you start to get used to who Raoul is, who the order is,
Hmm.
what their objectives are, rather than just having them be a conga line of faceless gun-toting people. And I tried to make it easy to access the different kinds of competition, because I tried to sum them up. So the Antiquarian Society of Fablists are people just having fun with mythology. They they're kind of like the RSM, but they're not so interested in closing things off. They want everybody to share freely in everything that they find. So the RSM, who wants to keep things secret for their own purposes, going to run into that. The Order is more like, the people from the Mummy movies, the ancient societies that have always been trying to protect these things. And when the
Mm.
veil wasn't working, they would dissuade people in their own way. So for them, it's protecting the secrets of these myths from the modern world. Conspiracy theorists themselves, you can get fairly wacky with this, or
Hmm.
kind of bonkers people and a lot of internet stuff, and how weird things can get. But their focus is, reveal the truth of these myths. They're going to tell you everything that they don't want you to know. So you can have some, sort of crazy characters with that. The Phoenix group, their whole point is to profit from these myths. So if they can go and capture something and harvest its DNA, et cetera, to make something they can sell, you get much more of a sort of evil corporation, Jurassic Park vibe of the whole thing.
Yeah, I was even thinking like the purpose of the group in the Kong movies was to get some sort of profit
Right,
out of
right,
Kong
right.
or Skull Island.
Yeah, and you think about anybody that's going to harness the kind of money needed to put on these expeditions and equip them and, keep them secret and all this, they're going to want some sort of payback for their money in many cases. So that kind of a group makes a lot of sense. Um, and then there's the Concave, which is sort of a dark twin of the RSM. They're also hunting this stuff out, trying to keep it quiet, trying to get it for themselves, trying to beat RSM to the prize, because they have very similar goals of wanting to use what they find. And even with the RSM, the question is, well, what is the RSM planning to use it for? All sorts of interesting questions to answer.
Sure, yeah. So Hamster Doom asked, in a black and white world, are the RSM the good guys? And it
It's
sounds like
all
you're
up to
saying,
the GM.
yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like it's up to the GM, and it's up to you your players to decide then for themselves if they find out information from the GM on what they think, because maybe some players are like, no, we're good guys. Like, no, no, that's definitely evil.
and
There
the
could be
point of
a
it,
moral quandary, a moral gray area here.
absolutely, and I'm glad that came up because that's kind of at the heart of the myth hunts. Is like, okay, you're going in to collect some sort of evidence of this myth, and if you have a an analog camera and you can capture images that the veil doesn't mess with, okay, images is good, that's good, but usually DNA is better, and there's going to be choices you have to make to say, okay, this seems to be a fairly benign creature. It doesn't seem to want to kill us or anything, but it also doesn't really want to let us get near it. Are we going to tranquilize the thing and, scrape off skin cells? Or, you know, if it is more violent, are we just going to kill this thing and take back a body? Where's the group decide it's going to go? Where are they going to draw the line as to what they think they could do? And depending on how you want the RSM to feel, the RSM could be fine with, whatever the group decides is okay, or they might press them to, push that boundary and do things they're less comfortable with. So you can really play with that because it's not black and white always what really should happen when you get to the myth.
Right. So really, just leaving it up to, like you said, the game masters decide how they want this particular adventure campaign, the hunt, to go, um, and how they want the RSM to feel.
Right.
Uh, yeah. And so depending on how that is, they might find themselves in a situation where the RSM may be willing to ally with some of these temporarily with some of these factions on certain situations, depending on what's happening. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you could end up having characters begin to have relationships with NPCs from other factions. And then, okay, well, that could be sort of a professional respect, or it could become a deeper relationship, and then you sort of have to navigate what that is. But I think uh, that's a very good scenario of saying, okay, the RSM has certain clues, and this other group has some certain clues, and they're not so opposed to each other that they won't, you know, talk in a neutral spot and decide that, okay, if we both pool our clues, we might actually find this thing, and so we'll be allied for the period of time. I mean, I think that's a very good way to put a challenge and a twist into a myth hunt.
Yeah. Since Jim always asking the good questions, wants to know: do you have any favorite stories from a playtest?
I think the favorite one that I've gotten that people have a lot of fun with is the Minotaur myth hunt, because you go to Crete and there's an archaeological dig, but there's also clues that there have been some killings in the area, and so as they start um, trying to track down exactly what's happening, they uh, they start hearing rumors about there's some big guys going around town and getting involved in like a motorcycle gang, or this, that, or the other. And the players were just like, well, wait a minute, we expected to go into a labyrinth and hunt our way around and try to find something that's just sitting around twiddling its thumbs. And in this case, the Minotaur has been alive for thousands of years. It learns, and it's become quite adept at sliding into society in subcultures where its appearance can kind of be you know hand waved a little bit, and people can accept it a little bit. So um, them having to realize that they need to go negotiate with a biker gang to be able to go talk to the Minotaur that they're trying to hunt, and then sort of figure things out from there, was a bit of a mind bend for them.
Interesting, because so the Minotaur was like not always behind the veil.
Right. It had decided to, to venture out and kept learning about the world. And, the veil sort of always came with it and helped hide the bull head
Okay.
from people. But yeah, it was enjoying, being, a big man on campus in society. And every once in a while, yeah, it had to kill somebody, but it hung out in violent groups, and that just wasn't a bad thing.
So you just said something that made me kind of rethink the veil real quick. And so is the veil, you know, geolocatable, or is it more that the veil is an attribute of the creatures?
It is more attuned to the creatures. Now, in many cases, the creatures have a habitat, especially the plant myth objectives. They have a particular habitat, so the veil tends to be, right around that habitat, whatever their
Sure.
hunting range or whatever it is. But it's really there because they are there. So if they are moved, that's another aspect. Well, if you collect specimens, if you get individuals of some mythological group to go back with you, and they go back to the RSM and to the country estate that they call the zoo, um, they're bringing some of that veil with them. And what does that effect have on what the RSM is doing and their own equipment, and you know them
Mm.
studying that aspect as well.
Being able to basically make can they basically create a veil themselves so that they can have like some sort of essentially a cloaking device almost themselves, or who
All
knows
sorts
what.
of different ways.
Yeah,
The secret RSM research could be taking this. Yeah.
interesting. All right. Well, I am done with my questions. I don't see any more questions from our chat community. Thank you to those who did join us. Jim, do you have anything else that we want to mention before we jump off?
No, I just really appreciate your time. I'm really happy that I've done this in partnership with Mike Lafferty of Fainting Goat Games. I've learned quite a bit doing the Kickstarter, and he's had great talent that's helped to do layout and such. I do have
Oh yeah, who did the layout?
Bill the Bunny, who does a
Bill.
bunch of the Pinnacle stuff.
Okay.
So the
Awesome.
layout's going to look really familiar.
Good.
The artists, I'm really happy with the artists. And some of the stuff is like Drive Through RPG, Dean Spencer, who has a bunch of stuff you can get for commercial use for that's little spot things. But the
Mhm.
cover of both books comes from a person. His online handle is Bogelbear, Bogelbear, and he's one of a few different artists on Etsy who create these pieces of art that look like a page from an old journal of like a naturalist who has done a hand sketch of the creature, and there's all sorts of notes in the margin about saw the creature eating this kind of vegetation, or it appears to shed its scales, or
Sure.
whatever it is, but treating it like it was an actual creature, and what they might find. And the artwork was amazing. So I was able to get him and use two pieces of his artwork for the cover of the two books. And then finally, the guy who did the pre-gen artwork, Stefano Marinetti, has done several of my books now. I love his work. He is supremely great to work with. I can give him a fairly detailed sketch of what I want, and he can really bring it to life. Um, so I always like to make sure those guys get the attention they deserve.
Sure, yeah. So if you guys want to check out the Royal Society for Mythology, the Kickstarter link is down below in the description. There's two reward tiers. One is the $5 tier, which just gets you the PDF copy delivered through Drive Through RPG, and there is the $7 tier, which is what I backed, which gets you the PDF, and it gets you the at-cost voucher for the print-on-demand version of the RSM. So
Right.
basically, when this is done, and after they confirm that they got the proofs and everything, that the book looks good, you'll get a coupon code to get it at cost, which means you pay for shipping and for what it costs for Drive Through RPG to print the book, and nothing extra. So take a look at that. Both, again, being delivered through Drive Through RPG. And
And
yeah,
both of them are complete. They are fully created, laid out, approved for print. They're ready to go.
oh,
So
you got the print's approved too.
yep,
Very nice, awesome. Well, I mean, as soon as we get basically, then you're just waiting for Kickstarter to end. Make sure you guys get your money, and then you guys can start doing delivery.
yep,
So
should be quick.
should be quick. So yeah, check that out, guys. We are definitely in we've been in a slower season for Kickstarter, so you got the whole time. Cheesy Cookie wants a shout out, so I'll go ahead and shout him out. Cheesy Cookie that's my brother-in-law who is watching our house back home. So thank you for watching our house, David. We appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Same time. I'll still be in Scotland for the next like 10 weeks, I think. So we'll be doing 3 p.m. Eastern time for a bit, and we'll go from there. Thank you all, and you all have a great day, and stay savage, everybody.
All right, thanks, Goose.